Welcome to Lesson 12, Toon and Comic Styles. We'll take another look at the Toon Outline option for adding ink strokes to our final renders. Next, we'll explore the comic book preview mode for amazingly simple comic effects, as well as the brand new geometric edge lines feature that adds real-time inking control to your scenes. We'll move on to cartoon display styles to view our scenes in a real-time Toon style. Next, we'll check out Toon Shaders to create a broadcast quality final render Toon style. And finally, we'll look at Flash render options for Toon renders in a vector format. Alright, let's jump right in. Okay everybody, this is going to be a fun one. Toon and comic styles, some of my favorite features to work with in Poser. And over the years, the Toon and comic features have just expanded and improved with every new version, so we have several different ways of approaching Toon and comic styles and multiple ways of rendering and outputting them. So before we jump into those styles, let's first see what scene I'm working with here. You can use any characters posed out any way you like using any lighting. It really does not matter. But if you want to follow along, these nice 3D Toon characters really help optimize the Toon theme. You can find them in figures, down in your cartoon folder, cartoon subfolder, and I'm working with Freddy and Gramps too. So I brought them in the scene, and their materials are all the defaults, and I've got them posed out. Took me maybe 5 minutes to get this pose, and kind of looks like Grandpa giving his grandson a nice high five. They're having a good time. And my lights are pretty simple, just two area lights. This light's at about 50% with shadows on. This is another area light at about 30% and shadows off. So let's jump into our first Toon style that we're going to cover. We've actually already covered it. Remember this kitty glowing scene here with the nice Toon outlines. What a beautiful hybrid type of effect using the underlying Firefly full quality render with this nice Toon outline stroke effect that it overlays on top of it. Just beautiful stuff. Looks like something out of a graphic novel or something, or a nice colored comic book. Let's go ahead and look at this again with this current scene. And we know that if we go up to our render settings, Command or Control Y, we want to use the Firefly render engine because it's the only render engine with this Toon outline. You can see it checked here, so you want to make sure you check that and realize you can't do this in Superfly or any other render engine. This is only available for Firefly. Goes to show every render engine has its strengths and unique characteristics. And we got some options here, different stroke styles and thicknesses. And I'm going to go without subsurface scattering because it really didn't impact the scene much. And I'll hit Enter to save those settings. And I've got these already rendered out, so I'm just going to go ahead and go up here. That's the scene without Toon outline, and there it is with it. Beautiful, huh? Again, the nice hybrid effect with the textures and shader coming through with a nice stroke outline for a very unique hybrid style effect. There's a thinner pen stroke, and then here we go with that pencil stroke with that etched graphite line, like so. I think I like this one the best, the thin pen line. So let's go back to the scene here, and let's move on to the next style. If we see this little ball down here, if you hit it, you get your comic preview options. Now, this geometric edge lines, this is brand new for Poser 11. If you click on it, you get real-time geometric edge lines. They're very similar to the Toon outlines, but you got quite a different look here. Based on this slider, you can go very thick. You can see if this weld option helps you out getting rid of some of the artifacts that pop up, because sometimes it's a bit strong on some of your elements. And I think I'll leave it with something like that. And if I exit out of there, now you got to understand the geometric edge lines, they will not show up in your final renderers such as Firefly or Superfly or Sketch. You can only render these out in the preview renderer, and it's based off of whatever's going on in the scene using your OpenGL preview. So let's go up to our render settings, Command or Control Y. We'll hop over to the preview tab, and of course you can optimize things, but they're pretty good with the default, so I'll just leave them there. I'll hit Enter to exit. Now we could of course render using anti-alias document, which is using the preview render engine as well. And let's go ahead and before we render, make a few modifications, because when we render our preview scene, remember it's going to use the real-time shadows. And so I want to bump up the preview shadow map size for that light. And let's go ahead and select that light. It's going to be light 2 that has shadows on. And I'll bump up the preview shadow map size under properties 1 level, and now it's nice and smooth. And then this light here, the other light, it's got the line coming through for the area light. I'm going to turn the visibility off. The light's still on, I just turned the icon off. And now if I hit Command or Control R, we can render this out. And the great thing about the preview renderer is look at that, it took 1 second to render that image. So fast we didn't even notice. And the OpenGL preview is pretty darn awesome. And so when we use the preview renderer, we still get great results without having to even deal with the waiting times of the Firefly engine. So let's go ahead and move on back to the preview scene. And we can see, and if we come back into the comic preview options, we've also got these comic book filter options. If you try black and white, look at that. Isn't that sweet? We got this nice classic bleached out comic book effect. And if you move the threshold slider, the shader effect increases and decreases when you slide the values up and down. And you can see that. Now, there's 3 different things affecting this comic book filter here. It's going to be the threshold value, your lighting, and your material settings. Now, if we slide this up and down, we notice that it takes effect on the clothing immediately, and it takes a while before it affects the face, as you can see right there. So we'll go ahead and leave it there. And let's go ahead and explore the color option right here. And it's very different. It's using the same shader effects, but now we've got the full details of our shader from our material groups and the texture maps attached as well. So this is a really awesome look. And again, the clothing is being affected so much so that by the time it affects the face, the clothing is sort of overdone with this effect. So let's go ahead and just make the face look good, and we'll fix the clothing later. Go ahead and exit out of there. Now, you can affect the lights, because that's the other thing that impacts this effect. And you can see there, has a big impact on it. And it's just affecting the way the shading falls on the skin, but the effect is still the same intensity. The final way to affect it is by its materials. Let's fix that clothing by going into the material room, and notice that it's the darker colored surfaces that are being overblown by this effect. And so if we just dial down how dark those colors are, it'll fix it. So let's just select the coat there on Grandpa, and we'll make this brown color a bit lighter. And maybe lighter still by just adjusting the same color, but using this slider to get lighter values. And I think that's just a bit too light, maybe something about like that. There we go. Now I'll select his pants, and I'll do the same thing, but I can just copy the color from the jacket like so. And let's go to the boys' clothes, and we can just do the same exact thing. Grab a lower value of red, and the same with his jeans. Now the jeans are a little different. It's coming from a blue texture map. Now the blue's a little different. I noticed that if I just crank up the diffuse value to 4, I could take advantage of that nice splotchy jeans texture. And because it's blue, it just gets handled differently. So making all these modifications individually really helps. And then I'll click his hair and bring down that to a lighter color as well. Maybe a little bit lighter. There we go. We're good to go. Let's get back in our scene. We're looking awesome. And I'm just going to go ahead and render this out. Command or Control R using the preview renderer. And it just takes about 2 seconds, and there, everything's nice and anti-aliased. Look at all these beautiful smooth out edges now. This is a wonderful image here. It looks like a really cool style, putting together these different themes and effects. I really love it. Now let's go ahead and get back down to our comic preview options. Now that we fixed the issues with the clothing, let's go back to black and white mode, and let's render that one out as well. Command or Control R. And we can see the nice anti-aliasing took effect. And so there's the differences using the color and the black and white. Both are really awesome. Just love playing with this comic book filter effect and these new geometric edge lines. So really cool stuff there. Let's go ahead and turn off geometric edge lines. Turn off the comic book filter. And let's explore yet another way of using a Toon style right here in our display styles. Now everything we've done so far has been based off the full texture shaded display mode, but we've worked with the other display modes like wireframe and outline and silhouette, but these cartoon display modes, there's the cartoon, and that's the next one, cartoon with line. It just adds these thin stroke outlines to it all over the place. And this is pretty interesting. It's another real-time OpenGL effect, but we have some options here. If we right-click in the scene and go down to cartoon settings, you've got some different cartoon settings right here. Now, these settings for comic book and geometric edge lines, those just turn on the same effects we just worked with. The ones up here are different ways of setting up our cartoon display settings. We're currently on 3 tones. We can see those 3 tones here, the gray, the darker gray, and the black. If you go down to 1 tone, you can see now you've got just the 1 tone and this sort of 1970s old school cartoon look. So let's go ahead and we can do highlights, as you can see there. Not so crazy about that. And then there's smooth toned. That's pretty interesting, but I think what's best is this 3 tones with no highlight. Now, it's pretty sort of muted and grayed out, and it's going to create a color based off of our diffuse colors in our material settings. So let's go to the material room and see what's going on. Now, if you click on Grandpa's face here, the diffuse color is already white. And so this is a little unfortunate. We've got some limitations here with this cartoon display style. You can't get a pure white in your surfaces in this particular Toon style. Your white is going to be gray. We can experiment with other colors. Let's say we want to make him, say, blue. We can do that. What if we go with more of a Simpsons yellow, gold type color, something like that? And that's a little bit better. We can at least bring some color, but notice we picked a bright yellow and it still muted it out. So it's always going to dull down your colors using this real-time cartoon display. So let's go ahead and at least bring in as much color into the scene as possible. And so I can go ahead and click the boy's face and do the same thing, just add a nice yellow. And let's go ahead and add some color to his pants. Cartoon display does not utilize textures at all, so we'll just disconnect the texture. Bring the diffuse value back down to 1 and just copy the blue from the texture itself. And that's pretty cool. Let's click on a shirt. Now, every Toon style effect, whether it's the comic book options or the cartoon style effects, they all have their strengths and weaknesses. The comic book color option did not allow us to go with a dark red, but we got nice bright colors. This, we don't have nice bright colors when it comes to white and yellow, but we can use a nice bright red. So as you can see, things change quite a bit depending on which Toon style you're using. We can even make the blues an even brighter blue if we want, something like that. So it really just depends. I'll make Grandpa's jacket maybe kind of green. There we go. And the pants, let's take them back to brown the way they originally were. Maybe not so dark brown, something like that. Okay, great. Now there's a little transparency issue with Grandpa's glasses. And I noticed the diffuse value, if I take it to 1, for some reason a value of 0 overrides the transparency. So now we can fix that by making that adjustment there. And I'm going to click on the boy's cornea and just make it black and really start to get this feeling like a cartoon as much as possible. So let's go ahead and go back to the pose room. And we can render this out using the preview render, Command-Control-R. And again, this is another style that will only render using the preview render option. And so there we go. Now it's definitely got a sort of dimmed color effect, but I've seen lots of animations that have a dulled color effect. And so they all have their strengths and weaknesses. Which one of these styles is most pertinent to your particular type of project, your mood, the emotional quality you're going for? I could see this working for some more serious film festival type animations. Now let's go ahead and get back to the preview scene. And let's make a modification here. Well, first of all, remember, we can play with our lights to get the shading much more dramatic like so. You can see that works pretty good. And I'll show you a little trick here. If you right-click in the scene, the cartoon settings were meant for OpenGL, but look what happens when we go to 3D mode. Everything brightens up really strong. Now we lose all the cartoon settings. We're stuck with just our 2 tones. We don't even have the option to select the other styles, but it looks pretty cool. It's got a unique look to itself. Even though it's limited in the settings way, we still have a much more vibrant color scheme to play with. Now we do have some visibility issues with the teeth. Let's just turn those off because there's often not teeth in cartoons anyway. As we can see, it actually looks way better. And we can try another preview render. And it takes just a second. It'll smooth out the edges there, nice and smooth. Now, notice another limitation to 3D mode is no transparency on your object. So it's basically give or take depending the Toon style and the settings that you have going on with it. So I'm showing you as many as I can so you can take advantage of all the different ways of incorporating your own style. Now, let's go ahead and move on to yet another way of applying a toon style. Now first, let's go and change our display style back to texture shaded. And we want to take our preview mode back to OpenGL. There we go. And let's go to the material room. And what we can do, I'm going to click on Grandpa's skin, is make use of this Set Up Toon Render Whack-Row shortcut here. This is one of the coolest ways to set up a toon style, and it gives you all the benefits of everything we've seen so far. There's no limitations to the vibrancy of the colors, there's no limitations to transparency, and we can get real premium quality toon styles going here. Now, to really optimize this effect, we really don't need any of these other nodes. It's just going to muddy our workspace up here. And I really want nice, solid toon colors. So let's just start deleting all the textures attached to Grandpa's face. All of them one by one. Now, with Grandpa's face selected, just click the Setup Toon Render. It asks you, do you want specular highlights on your surfaces? Just say yes for now. We really don't, but I want to show you the difference. And you want to make sure, if it doesn't automatically set up your channels here as white, you can see they're black, we're going to want to make these white. So I'll just copy that white from the Toon Shader there. And there we go. Now the Toon Shader is actually working. And this is the shader, this Toon Shader here, that is actually driving the entire toon look. The specular highlight that we opted for is right here. So all we have to do is start adjusting these colors, and we're going to start to get Grandpa's face looking like a nice toon style. Now the light color is basically your base color. So if you click there, I'll just copy the yellow from the diffuse that we had earlier, and you can see it's already coming together. Let me just change to my face camera so we can see better what's going on here. Now the dark color is basically your shading for your cartoon effect. And I'll show you a little trick here. If you click this color, copy your base color, come back into your shading dark color, and pick a lower, darker value of that yellow. This allows you to mimic what cartoons do with that nice shading effect. If you look at all the cartoons on TV, they always have a base color, and then they'll have a shading effect that gives some sort of shadowing or shading to the surface, so it's not just a flat, solid, boring color. Now, what we can do is adjust the spread. Notice it's at 0.1. If I make it, say, 1, watch what happens. It smooths out that shading, so it's a gradient, deep fall off. You can barely notice it. Let's do something like 0.5, and you can see it dials it down. If we do something like 0.1, now it's very crisp, and you can even go 0.01 and make it even crisper. Now it's like perfectly crisp like that. And we can again adjust our lighting, and you can see adjusting your lights adjust the shading effect as well, where it falls on the face. Let's go ahead and click on a skin again. Now you'll notice these highlights here. I don't really like them. They kind of just dirty it up if you ask me. Maybe they're good in some cases. If we had a balloon, I think this would look great, but it doesn't look so good on skin. So I'm just going to delete the glossy node here, which is generating the specular highlights. And in the future, if you set that up, you could just say no for specular highlights and you won't get that. So we can just delete that, and now look how much cleaner it looks. Now, the ink color, that is basically a method of Toon Outlines like we have already utilized, or geometric edge lines, but it works differently with this inking method. And that's connected to the line width. It already has a black color, but if we give it, say, a value of 0.5, you can see what it does. It does more than just create edge strokes and Toon Outlines. It also falls onto the surface in these curves. So because of that, I'm not really digging it, to tell you the truth. There's something we can do with this that's pretty powerful though. We can repurpose the Toon stroke effect, the inking, for a highlight if we just change the color. So watch this. If we change this from black, copy that yellow, and then do that trick where we go in there again, instead of going to a darker value for a shading tone, let's go to a higher value for a highlight effect. There we go. And it's sort of like we're creating a much more cleaner way of doing our specular. So I like this a lot better. Instead of splotches, it's a nice smooth highlight. And we're starting to get closer to what cartoons actually do. If you look at all your cartoons in television today, they are using a base color with a shaded portion of the surface and then a highlight. One that comes to mind the most is The Simpsons. Now, I'll teach you a little trick here. What you can do is Google an image of The Simpsons. I can't do it here on camera because they're very protective of their copyright, but if you Google an image of The Simpsons like Homer or Bart, import it as a background picture into your background here, and then you can take these color pickers here and you can sample the gold from Homer's head. And then you can go back in and sample the shading that Homer has going on the side of his head. And then finally, you can go into the ink color that we're going to use as a highlight and sample Homer's highlights or any of the Simpsons characters. Now, I can't do this with you on camera, but if you do this for the Simpsons characters or any characters that you like, you can literally completely mimic the look that they have going on and have their 3-color system. Now, I already did this on the side, and I saved them as material presets that are literally from the Simpsons characters. And I've got them in my material presets here, in my personal projects library, my materials, and here they are. So I'm just going to go ahead and load the Simpsons skin right here. And these are sampled from a Simpsons image. It is the exact shading and base color and highlight going on. And of course, you can adjust this with your lights to get it to fall however you want. So pretty cool stuff here. And then what we can do is I'm just going to go back to the main camera. I'm going to click on the boy, and I'm going to add that same preset to the boy and his skin. All right, now we got a nice color scheme going on. Now, remember, we opted out of the stroke or the inking and used it instead as a highlight. But if we want, even from within the material room, we could turn on geometric edge lines to sort of get a feel for the inking. And I'll just do that just for now for a temporary preview. We're actually going to render this in the Firefly engine and use the Toon Outlines like we've already used before for some nice, super clean outlines. But this geometric edge lines is a nice way to preview your Toon Outlines, as long as you have a nice small value. Now, this same methodology here, this different colored Toon Shader with your base color, shaded area, and highlighted area, you can do this for every surface based on the same light to dark values. And so I already did this for all the different colors I have going on for the red. I saved out a red one here. And so it'll save time for you to just go on and do this yourself. You saw the formula that I already used. You can see for red, I got the same formula, the base color, the darker version, and the lighter version. And then you can just save these out one at a time. You can either copy your node here and paste it onto your new material or just set up a new Toon render node right there. So that's for the red. I'll go to the blue pants and I've got a blue one here. And I've got a one for the hair. I'm going to use the brown. Actually, let's use blue for the hair. Sticking with the Simpsons model, kind of looks like a combination of Bart and Milhouse there. Let's go ahead and, you can tell I'm a Simpsons fan, right? Let's go ahead and go to Grandpa's jacket, and I've got a green one here. And the pants, I'll use the brown one. Okay, great. And for Grandpa's shirt, I've got a white one. And I'm going to select the boy's eye. So it's not that 3D shaded eye, and it's got that nice, more sharper Toon white. There we go. Things are really popping now. And finally, Grandpa's hair. And I think that'll do it. What a difference that makes. Let's go back into the pose room. And this is really popping. Look at the beautiful shading here. The nice shaded effect right here. And the nice highlighting here. If you look at the Simpsons image, you'll see it's the exact color scheme. Very cool stuff. And you'll notice this formula is basically for almost every cartoon out there. And they just will adjust the levels of the shading, like how much does it shade over the face and so on, which you can control with your lights, as we've seen. Okay, let's go ahead and try rendering this in both the preview engine using geometric edge lines, and then we'll try it in the Firefly engine using the Toon Outlines from the Firefly. So let's go Command or Control Y for our render settings. And we want to make sure we got the preview tab. And I can just hit render now. Okay, looking pretty darn good actually. And that's using geometric edge lines. Now let's go ahead back to the preview scene. So now let's go back into the comic book preview options, turn geometric edge lines off. There we go. And we'll go back into the render settings, Command or Control Y, and we'll go to Firefly. We got Toon Outline on. I think I'm going to emulate the Simpsons theme as much as possible with medium pen. And that's it. Let's render now. And it's using the Firefly render, so it's going to take a little bit longer, but not that much longer. Still get done in less than 30 seconds or so. And the first pass is all the Toon Shaders. Look at these beautiful Toon Shaders here. I love this look so much. Completely transforms your 3D characters. And there it is. It lays in those Toon outlines. How cool is that? We just Simpsonified our nice cartoon characters, and they look like residents of Springfield. And let's compare the two. Now there's a real-time OpenGL preview render, and then there's our Firefly render. Yeah, I think it's worth the wait time of the Firefly render. There's just something about it that is just nice and sharp and very, very pretty to look at. Very beautiful. So let's go ahead and move on to yet another Toon style. Let's go to our render settings, Command or Control Y, and let's go ahead and go to movie settings. And what we're going to do, remember in format, we've got image files for outputting sequences of images like a folder of JPEGs or PNGs to build your own movie later in a video editor, or below Flash, you've got all the compressed video formats like QuickTime and AVI. And then you've got Flash here. This is pretty interesting. It's technically a fifth render engine inside Poser because it converts your renders into a vector format during the Flash export. Now, what we're going to do is go to the renderer type, and I didn't have good luck with the preview or the Superfly mode. I was getting some errors, and so I noticed my best results were with the Firefly. And now it's not using these to actually output the render. It all ends up becoming a Flash vector format after it uses the other engines as a preliminary renderer. Let's go ahead and go to Options. And you can just stick with the defaults here. We're going to automatically generate the colors. We'll come back and look at custom colors. So we'll just cancel out of there. And you can do a time span for animation. This Flash option is not in the single frame options. So you're going to have to fool it and say a span of just one frame. Now, when you do that, I've got some samples here. It'll end up creating a Flash SWF file to wherever you save it to. And when you pop that up, I'll teach you a trick. If you click and drag your SWF file and drop it in a web browser, I've got Google Chrome here, any web browser can view your SWF for you. And look at this, it's a vectorized version in a Flash format. So it's a very interesting look here. It's very artistic. It's almost like the sketch render a little bit. It's got this nice random sort of artistic flair to it that I actually enjoy. So this is a Flash format. If you bring this into the Flash program that I believe is now known as Adobe Animate, they just renamed it, well, you can actually edit the vector points of every shape and fill this entire shape with a color and every other shape you see. So it's truly vector with all the control points built into the file. And so I just did a few different versions. Here's another one. And if you pick the sketch renderer as your render engine, then I get something like this with the vectorized sketch strokes. So pretty interesting, the combinations here. Now, when I look at these different images here, it reminds me, this vector look reminds me of the Obama poster. I went ahead and did a search for this. Remember this? Now, whether you like Obama or not, I'm really looking at the artistic value of the poster. Shepard Fairey is the artist who did this, amazing artist, and this beautiful classic look he came up with. And so I think of that when I see vector art like this. So let's go back to the options, Command or Control Y, back in those Flash options. And I bring that up because you can do custom colors. You can specify the number of colors, more than 4. Here we have 4, and you click on a box and you can just pick all the colors you want. So what I did is using that method, let me go back to my browser, is I actually brought in this image as a background so that I could then sample the colors of this background in Poser. And then I deleted the background, I cleared it out, and then the render I came up with was this, based off the Obama poster colors. And then I basically used the face camera to get in closer to Grandpa's head, and I came up with this. It then distributed red much more thoroughly throughout the entire face of Grandpa. So it looks like Grandpa running on hope. He makes a great poster for hope. So the next thing I did is I went back to the Jedi mission, and I brought back in our cool Jedi ship here, and I used it in the Flash setting, and it did a beautiful job. Look at our background of the desert. There's just something about this Flash look that I really, really enjoy. So yet another way of discovering a Toon style. And you can basically overlap all your styles. Let's go back here and check out some of the work that we've done. As you can see, there's multiple combinations of the effects that you apply, the different render engines that you use, the way you set up your shaders, how light will affect your shading effects, such as comic book preview. Beautiful stuff here, really loving it. Black and white version. Our nice cartoon display modes, 3D display modes, and finally where we left off, this nice Simpsons project here. Alright folks, it's up to you how great you work with this stuff. Go ahead and have some fun. I hope you learned a lot. This was a fun one for me. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you on the next video.